Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn from the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. My name is Stacy Nell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. Today, I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled, to be joined by my friend. I'm going to call her my friend. I hope she thinks we're friends. Good. My friend, Secretary of Administration, DeAngela Burns-Wallace. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to join you all.
Fantastic. We only have a half an hour, and I feel as though if I asked all the questions I wanted to ask, we would not get through everything. So I'm going to sort of cut to the chase. Well, first of all, it's a lunch and learn. Have you eaten lunch yet today?
I have not, but I promise that I will shortly after this. I've ordered something, so
Okay. Because you must eat. It's important to keep our strength up.
Yes.
We're both at home. I'm at home actually on the upswing from COVID. I got COVID last week. My 11-year-old brought it in the house. She brought the plague home, and she was actively sick for 2 days. And then I sort of, as soon as she was sick, we all sort of scattered to the opposite corners of the house because we're like, okay. Mm-hmm. And of course I get it because the mom has to nurture the baby. So
exactly.
I'm feeling better. At least I'm staying awake most of the day. And I haven't eaten lunch yet either, but I did have breakfast. So, okay, but to cut to the chase, I asked you on specifically to talk about your role as a Secretary of Administration in the current administration, and to talk specifically about boards and commissions. I know that's one real way that people can get involved in government, and that not all boards and commissions are paid positions. So if a person would like to get involved in boards and commissions, and since you are the Secretary of Administration, I would love to have you talk about that. But before that, if anyone has time, please Google this woman and read her bio. Every time I read her bio, I think, what have I done with my life? I have been just twiddling my thumbs. So you're from Kansas City, Missouri originally, but you actually served in the State Department as in the foreign service of the State Department, which means that you also know French and Mandarin Chinese. And you actually have been stationed. You've been stationed overseas. So how, when you were a little girl in Kansas City, Missouri, did you always think to yourself, someday I'm going to go to China? Because there are people who do that. They dream about going to China, or they dream about going to France, but they don't always make it. But you made it. Okay. So how did you get from Kansas City, Missouri to living out your dreams overseas? All right, go.
So what I will say is that I always had a passion for travel. And an interest in languages and cultures. And so when I was in high school, we all take a foreign language, and in my high school, everybody took French. And so there were like 5, 6, 7 course, classes of French, of Spanish. Everybody took Spanish, but I took French. And we only had one class of us that were in French. And our instructor was she was a dual citizen, native French born. And I always had this idea of like, I'm going to go and I'm going to study, in Paris when I'm in undergrad. And she talked about that. And of course, being a French teacher is something that she, loved and aspired to have her students continue. But I knew that I had this love of cultures and languages and exploration. And so when I went to college, one of the majors that I was interested in coming in was international policy, international relations, international business. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I had this flair that I wanted to understand and learn all things international. And that evolved into something that eventually landed me in a career as a foreign service officer, as a diplomat. And I did study in Paris. Stanford had a exchange program, and we studied in Paris for a semester. And picked up other languages along the way, eventually Mandarin when I entered the Foreign Service. And was stationed, in a couple of different places, both in Africa and in China and in DC. But it really stemmed, I think, early on from this idea of having a passion around learning about people and cultures, languages, and an appreciation for languages, being able to communicate with people in their language and understand their culture.
So how many languages can you communicate? Like, would you consider yourself fluent in a bunch of language, or can you because there's conversation and then there's like, I'm going to be a diplomat.
What I will say is that I have reached the level of fluency in French and Mandarin Chinese at different points in my life and my career. Right. My French is okay these days. My Mandarin Chinese is a bit rusty, but I did travel to China a few years back on a work trip. And I was able to dust it off pretty good and was able to navigate for a weekend, almost 10 days with my family. Wow. And through my business meetings at the time. So I've reached that level of fluency before. Right now, they're a bit rusty, but I was trained and have studied in both French and Mandarin Chinese.
Okay. Again, so many questions. I just want to ask about this time of your life. I'm like, were you a spy? You can tell us. I won't tell. Okay, no, that's not a question. Okay. Okay, I do, but I do. So thank you for that. And I think you said something in telling that story that's actually important as to why I appreciate you so much. You said that your French teacher would talk to you about this idea of being involved and going abroad to study. And so someone had to sort of show you that that's something that's possible. And I appreciate that in you because as people may know, I had run for office. And one of the first things that had happened when I ran for office is I watched, it was during the height of pandemic. So it was a Zoom thing and you were on it. And Kenya Cox, my predecessor here at KAAAC, was on it. And there was another woman, I feel bad that I can't remember who was on it. But I remember watching that, just sitting at home, watching that and seeing you and thinking, oh my gosh, is that there's life outside of running for office. Like there's other things to do. And I mean, I know you're laughing at me, but it's true. This idea that you cannot be what you don't see. Mm-hmm. And so for me to see you, honestly, for me to see Kenya, for me to see Black women involved in the government, doing things that I had not considered doing was very important to me. And I was a full grown woman, much less, inspiring young people. So I wanted to ask you about how did you go from being, that little girl in Kansas, Missouri to being in the Foreign Service in China and France and South Africa. So how did you come to be involved in policy? I mean, you studied policy and administration. How did you come to be involved here in Kansas?
So my journey is a winding one, and I sometimes call it eclectic. If somebody was to start at one point and get to my end point, a lot of people can't figure out how do you get there, right? And when I meet with a lot of young people and they say, well, I want to do what you do. So how do I do that? And I always tell them, your journey is your own and your journey has to be uniquely your own as mine has been. My undergraduate degrees are in international relations and African-American studies, which is my other passion. And then I went on to get a master's. My undergrad is from Stanford. And I went on to get my master's from Princeton in public policy. So my whole career as a State Department Foreign Service officer was public policy just at the federal level. And I was a management officer. So responsible for a lot of the functions that I currently have for the state. I was responsible for those same types of functions at U.S. embassies and consulates around the world during my time with the State Department. But I transitioned after a certain point. The world began to change. I was in the Foreign Service up until about 2004. And as 9/11 changed a lot for us internationally, the invasion of Iraq did as well. And some of the work that I was doing, I felt wasn't having the same level of impact that we were before. And I pivoted and, as I would say, reinvented my journey and went back to my undergraduate alma mater and started a career in higher education. I really thought I was going to spend a couple of years there kind of retooling, figuring out what I wanted to do next. And it turned into a 15-year career in higher ed, leading and managing higher ed institutions and creating access and opportunity for students. That took me from Stanford back to school to get a doctorate in higher ed management. Then I came back home to the University of Missouri. And then in 2016, landed as a vice provost of undergraduate education at the University of Kansas. Unbeknownst to me, My name was moving in rooms and conversations that I just didn't know. And I think that that's an important piece of this conversation is
Yes.
letting people see the work that you do, the impact that you have, letting them know that you're interested in leading and being in roles that have tremendous impact over community. And sometimes people will carry your name into different rooms. And then sometimes you have to raise your hand and say, I'm interested. So when the opportunities come, they can be matched. I got a phone call from the governor's office in the spring of 2019. She was building her cabinet. She wanted to meet with me and eventually offered me an opportunity to join that cabinet. But as I say a lot when I'm working with my students, readiness is about preparation and opportunity. So to ensure that we have the depth of representation that we need, we have to be ready. We have to have the preparation to step into the roles that we want to lead into, and we have to be ready to answer the call when the opportunity comes before us.
That is awesome. Yes, preparation and being ready. I love that you said this idea that, um, and this leads directly because you're so good at this. It leads directly into talking about boards and commissions. This
Mhm.
idea of having your name be mentioned in rooms so that when opportunities come up, someone's already thinking, "Oh, I think DeAngela Burns-Wallace, Dr. DeAngela Burns-Wallace would be perfect for that. Oh, I think person A, B, or C would be the person who would be great for that." So, talk to us specifically about the boards and commissions. There are
Mhm.
several. I think I'm at home and my intern is someplace else. Hopefully she will drop in the link because we have the link ready on the website of where to go to look up boards and commissions. So hopefully, Sierra, if you can hear me, drop that link in. Okay, but go, please, Secretary, talk about that.
So it's interesting. The governor's office has an office of appointments, and that's actually who called me when this opportunity came up. And I will be honest, when I got the call, I just knew that the governor was going to put together a board on education, and I was going to be on that, and we were going to transform higher education in the state of Kansas. And lo and behold, it turned into something completely different. But I say that to say that that office of appointments, and the link should take you to the governor's page, Serving Kansans Office of Appointments. And there's actually a button on there that says apply to serve. And you go in and you can fill out an application and put it into the database for the governor's office. And it asks you all kind of your interest, your background, things of that nature. And what happens is that database is then used to then match on to opportunities that come about across, the boards and commissions. There's well over 150 boards and commissions that individuals can apply to. Most of them are positions where you volunteer and they are not confirmed. There are a handful that are Senate confirmation requiring and that require background checks. And so when you look at the different boards and commissions, there is explanations about the different boards, what they do, as well as the requirements for that. What I will say is that that office, also the contact for the individuals in that office is on the website as well. They welcome an opportunity if you have a question to reach out, but that's the starting point. And please understand that these boards and commissions, these are the entities that help set the policies and implement procedures and policies that impact our state operations in so many different areas.
Yes.
Your commission is one of those commissions with the African American Affairs Commissions. And there are some that are regulatory and licensure, some that are policy field related. It's just numerous. The good part is that how we start is by raising our hand, right? Going in, filling out that application, doing a bit of research around what boards and commissions are out there, what do they govern, what do they influence, what policies do they direct, where there might be some matches to your background and your interests. But I will say, just to give, that's a plug for those state level boards and commissions that the governor's office appoints. I also serve as a member of the advisory committee for United We, and their appointments project and Ready to Run, which is a partnership with KU's School of Public Policy and Public Affairs. And what I will say is that they also have initiatives where they are encouraging, particularly women, to think about running for various offices. And in that space, there's boards, there's commissions, there's your councils, there's everything from school boards to your city councils to county level to state level, right? And so part of this is preparing ourselves to be ready to run, to understand what that means. It also is about not just running for office, but I think, as Stacey pointed out, understanding that you can run, but you also can serve and apply to be on these boards and commissions that are crafting and drafting policy that help you understand and have huge influences. And if you don't think they do, think about the last 2 years and all that has happened as we have worked with, lived with, and had to change the way we moved and how some of our organizations worked due to COVID.
Right.
And many of those things, think about the school boards that were controlling what was happening to your communities and to your children. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but understand that that authority sits with that board, and they played an instrumental role in what happened in our communities.
Our county commissions.
County commissions, in terms of where policies were, where funding went, what types of resources are available. So understanding that us having seats at the table is about, both for women, individuals of color, that representation is at every level of the table. We need people to run. We need people to run at the highest levels. We need people to run at all of the local levels all the way through. But we also need people to step up and serve on boards and commissions that are drafting and implementing policies and procedures that are impacting our communities, our families, our businesses.
Right. I think that's such an important point, because I think I am always an advocate for talking people into running for office at all the various levels, right? Even right all the way down to precinct captain. I'm like, we need people to fill those offices. But I do truly understand that maybe not everyone has the constitution to say that they're going to run for office. One, I will always say, if you want to run for office. But I love that you made the point that these boards, these commissions do have an impact. They do have a voice, and they are shaping policy. They are having influences here and there. And if a person is concerned about I'm not an out front kind of run for office type person, that there are definitely ways to get involved that aren't campaigning politically types of situation. Okay. So that is your work with the Department of Administration. I would be remiss to not point out that you also had another entire state agency. You're our chief technical. Like, when I say that, I just, I read your bio and just think, wow, I need to live 3 lives to catch up to you. It's true. So you're over the Department of Secretary of Administration, but you're also the chief technical officer.
Yes, I'm the Chief Information Technology Officer for the executive branch. So all of our executive branch state IT falls under my purview as well. And work across all of the state agencies to deliver an IT infrastructure to the state, and all of those various systems that our citizens access, that we continue to try to modernize, make them stronger, make them easily and accessible. There are pieces and parts of that my operation touches in some way. We have a very large and extensive IT operation, as you can imagine. So it's decentralized. So many of our agencies, we have IT operations within each agency, and then we have the overall enterprise level that reports directly under my purview.
I think of you every time I do our security training. I'm like, I'm doing this to make sure that Secretary Burns-Wallace's job is easier, so that
I appreciate it.
I'm not the weak link in the very long chain.
I tell everyone right now, there is nothing that you can do better than ensuring that you are thinking about safety and security around IT, both from in your work environment, but also personally. This is a time and an age when you think about, and this actually kind of fits kind of interestingly together, right? When you think about things like running for office, when you think about serving on these boards and commissions, understanding your digital footprint, understanding and protecting that kind of digital footprint of where you are out there, where your name and your information is, what you have set up in terms of email accounts and how people can access to you and to your information, and what your public persona, particularly talking to my younger generation, on those social media environments are. I mentioned that at the state level, some of those boards and commissions require Senate confirmation and KBI background checks. I will say that in this day and age, when you are Senate confirmed and doing background checks, they ask for all of your social media handles and do a little bit of looking at that. These are just the things of, understanding as what our new reality is. And so being safe, being conscious, being mindful of all of your presence, not just your public presence and where you are and what you're doing, but also that social footprint, both for your own personal security, but as you think about these things, is an important piece as well.
So this is where I point out that I'm glad that social media came about after I was in high school, and that
very much high school and college. I will say, I'll just give that nod.
Yes, and that social media wasn't a thing until I was well into my 30s, and so by then I was like, oh, I should probably act like an adult, and not have pictures of it. Because back, when I was growing up, you had to mail the entire put the entire camera. Yeah. To Walmart, and they would give you the prints back. Okay,
yeah, we're showing our age here, Stacey. We're showing our age.
Listen, I say the last time I bought hair, I bought gray hair. I'm like, I'm just embracing it. I'm like, I'm just gonna buy the gray hair. Okay, so I do. We're under 10 minutes. I want to thank you so much for talking about these things. And I know the governor has been very intentional. Back to appointments, boards and commissions. Chronologic. Neither of you, I'm looking at comments. Mark McCormick, neither of you are being kind to those of us who are chronologically gifted. I am chronologically gifted. I recently had a birthday now. I'm fully middle-aged. The AARP has sent me my card. So I don't know if that gives anyone a hint to how old I actually am. But I wanted to
I don't have an AARP card, but it's coming. So
see, I have mine. Okay, but I wanted to swing back to the appointments. I mentioned, so the governor she's been very intentional about making sure that her appointments, because I guess my question is about how many appointments, do you even know how many appointments are made a year, or how many positions need to be filled?
Yeah. And there are hundreds. And because remember, we're talking about over 150 boards and commissions. Most boards and commissions can have anywhere from 6 to 20 members, right? She also stands up ad hoc commissions and boards and things of that nature. You mentioned Mr. McCormick. We both recently served on the governor's commission for racial equity. That was one that she stood up purposefully to address a limited term issues around race and equality. And that came about after George Floyd's murder. So there's both the standing ones as well as those that she stands up. But there are typically hundreds in any given year, and understand that because they rotate. So at any point in time, there will be a certain number that have to be replaced. To her intentionality, I have to say that over 20% of Governor Kelly's appointments that she has made since she came into office a little over 3 years ago have been persons of color. And of the appointees that were persons of color, over 60% of them have been women, which I personally love to hear. I will say that about 55% of the governor's total appointments have been female. So she has really that idea of both people of color as well as women and women of color being able to bring that representation has been significant. And in that, I mean, like we've actually seen that percentage of the number of female on boards and commissions have, since she started in January 19, overall, they were around 37% of all members of the state boards and commissions. By December of this past year, they were at 45%. So getting much, much closer to our percentages of our society, right? Where that representation matches.
So it shows having representation of the appointing in the appointing position increases representation across the board. So that's why, having more people even on boards will help representation downstream. There are a couple of questions. Lawanda Disha, can you see the comments? If you go into the upper right, there's a little thing that says comments.
I can't just yet, but keep talking and I'll try to see if I can find them.
Lawanda Deshazar says, what are the she was referencing back to the CREJ committee. What are the outcomes of that committee? I mean, I know there have been 2 reports that border on 90 pages apiece. So if you wanted to highlight anything from the CREJ.
What I will say is that our first CREJ, our first report was focused specifically on policing. And then our second report hit on a wider swath of areas, economic development, health, education. I think it was just those 3. Mr. McCormick, please correct me if I'm missing one. And what I will say is that if somebody, I don't know if we'll be able to drop it here, but I'll ask Stacey that maybe you can share it later. There are 2 reports. They had a series of recommendations that were tied to both reports. And the commission has actually worked with the governor's office, state agencies, and legislators to see where moving the recommendations into implementation. And there have been some things that have happened in the last 2 legislative sessions that align with some of the recommendations out of the report, but there is still a lot of work to do. All of the recommendations are not necessarily just state level. There are some aspects that are local level, and we saw some local movement based on some of those recommendations. I know there were some things that happened in the Wichita, Sedgwick County area that was a reflection of some of our recommendations as well. And so it is a mixture, but they are both 2 very robust reports with a number of recommendations, but we try to, as we identify them, identify like the entities by which the action would be taken. So it wasn't just like a laundry list. And again, we just finished a series of webinars with different stakeholder groups in which those recommendations, the second report, aligned. So we met with state legislators and talked about, what were the things in there that really that they could have impact on. We met with local political leaders and talked through. We met with education and economic sector leaders and talked through the recommendations and continue to do that work.
I get this question a lot. Is there, and again, we're running low on time. Is there something from one of those reports that we can point to out here in sort of after the aftermath to say that this is something that has come about because of the report? I can think of some, but can you think of?
I will have to say that there are. Could I list them right this moment? I apologize because I cannot.
Right. I just recently read. I know that Medicaid was expanded for new mothers out to 12 months. Like I know that was one thing that was in a report and that actually came about in real life. So I know the reports are so extensive that there are a lot of things that have sort of happened variously. Okay, but because there are a couple other questions I wanted to get to.
Yes.
Mark McCormick, of course, is he's not quite trolling us, but he has points that he's made in the comments. He says, if you have time, I'd love to know what the secretary sees as the biggest challenge facing African-American Kansans.
For me, I would say, and this is, just me personally speaking, I don't know that the issues that are facing our communities are getting the necessary attention and understanding throughout state government, state policy. I think that there are pockets where there is a deep connection into our community and the issues that our communities are facing, but not necessarily seeing it kind of throughout, like interwoven. Right. And because of the size of our population in Kansas, and because we are situated in certain big pockets and then not other places, I think it's unbalanced. Right. And so that for me, and one of the reasons, working with you all, your commissioners and other entities, always looking for when we did legislative day at the Capitol, looking for opportunity to raise our issues. I don't want to say like we all have singular issues, but there are a set of issues that are facing in our community that we need more visibility. We need more legislators understanding them. We need more leaders throughout the state understanding them, understand how they impact not just the direct communities that have larger African-American populations, but how it's interwoven to the health and the future of the state as a whole, right? not just about those populations, it's about the state as a whole.
Right.
So for me, it's, it goes back to representation. It's why I'm here. It's why I continue to say these things. But it also comes back to how do we ensure that visibility and the level of understanding is interwoven into the issues that Kansas is addressing, in the policies, in the laws that are coming out, the agencies that are engaging in those communities, and taking that to the next level.
Right. I mean, I've had conversations with legislators where that was sort of the argument I would make. Like, these issues that we're raising that I'm saying specifically have impact on the Black community, you have to understand, if you help the Black community, you're going to help, I would say you're going to help more white people than Black people, because just the numbers in Kansas. Okay, so we are truly at time. Thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate this. I know that you are going through life right now, and so to take even a half an hour out to talk to me has been very appreciated. In my last little 30 seconds, every time we do this, I always encourage people, please make sure you're registered to vote. Hopefully we can drop in the link to the Secretary of State voter view. You can check your registration. If you've moved recently, make sure they have your current updated addresses. There is a Kansas constitutional amendment that's going to be on the ballot on August 2nd, and that will be the only time you'll get a chance to weigh in on that ballot initiative. You must be registered to vote by July 12th in order to vote in the August 2nd primary. And if you think, oh, I'll talk about that constitutional amendment in November, you will have missed your opportunity. The only time to weigh in on this constitutional amendment will be August 2nd. Please check your registration at, let's see, I think I've got voter view pulled up. I can drop it in. Voter view, go. Please check your registration. Thank you so much, Secretary DeAngela Burns-Wallace, for coming on the show today. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for hosting, and please, continue the conversation. If I can be helpful, let me know. But thank you to you and the commission and all of the commissioners for the work that you all do in bringing voice to our communities and our issues. I truly, truly appreciate the partnership.
All right. Thank you very much. Everyone have a fantastic day. We'll see you next Monday.